Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks. I'm Nicholas Harvey.
And I'm David Riley.
And tonight's episode is on Inside the Freemasons.
By the United Grand Lodge of England.
Yeah, they released it on Netflix.
Yes, and I watched it.
You're supposed to ask me if I watched it.
Oh, sorry. Did you watch it, Nick?
I mean, I watched like a few minutes of it.
Uh-huh.
Did you watch it?
I watched all of it.
All of the first episode?
No, all the episodes.
It just came out.
Right, and I watched it because I am a Masonic nerd.
I thought you said watch the first episode.
No, watch the whole
Watch
thing.
the first season.
I said watch Inside the Freemasons.
All
right,
well, what'd you think about it?
we can talk about that after I rant.
Okay, what's tonight's rant on?
Tonight's rant is called Enough. We live in a time when Freemasonry must be considered to be radically countercultural. There are numerous reasons for this, but I'll just point out this one. In the age of the Kardashians, an organization that tells a man that there is value in being able to keep a secret is clearly outside the mainstream. That's not really a problem. Freemasonry is held to its own particular system of morality, while the profane world has been blown about by the gusts of fashion and the gales of fad. The fraternity, of course, has changed. There was a time when we met in taverns. There was a time full moon lodges were common because members appreciated the extra light on the way home. We should bring that one back. But our core, the nucleus of our fraternity, has stayed the same. Over the years, many forces have caused us to re-examine our customs, traditions, and practices. The growth of the fraternity following the world wars brought on changes intended to help the fraternity accommodate its growing pains. Today, the fall in membership, which some would point out is just a return to the norm, is forcing reconsideration of our real estate holdings and our outreach to young men. The fraternity should be willing to consider adjustments required in order to remain relevant to the present generation. Once we held large processions through the street. Today, we have web pages. Same function, different media. What we should not do is allow our enemies to force change upon us. We have always had enemies. From Hitler to Stalin to the theocrats of modern Iran, where tyrants and fanatics rule, Freemasonry has suffered. Even in the United States, the anti-Masonic movement left scars. In the UK, periodically the newspapers stir up public panic that Masons who are judges are somehow perverting the course of justice to benefit their brethren, without, of course, any evidence. The traditional answer of the fraternity to its critics has been silence. There was a kind of beauty in assuming that the lies would be seen for what they were by those that mattered. Unfortunately, too often the silence was filled with louder and bolder lies. And so the fraternity began to respond. And having responded, it is inevitable that we would begin to make small changes, small things, non-essential things, in order to try to reduce the criticism. Our buildings, once called temples, became centers and halls, so that the profane would not think Freemasonry was a pagan religion. The emblems of mortality, central to the Masonic philosophy, became embarrassments that have now been minimized or heavily redacted from profane view because they're spooky or weird. Our dollars are so heavily redirected to profane charity that in many cases our buildings have not been maintained, our lodge's programming has suffered, and worst of all, our brethren who need some form of relief are not served because we've made ourselves destitute in an attempt to show the world that we are charitable. Before someone misunderstands, I have no problem giving to public charities, but I don't think Freemasonry should give to profane charities at the expense of Freemasons or her own needs. We aren't in the business of raising dollars for charity. We're an initiatory society that helps men develop a mature masculinity and encourages them to improve themselves so that they, as better men, may improve the world. With each change and compromise, we lost some tiny bit of our soul, of our identity, of our patrimony. And what have we gained? The haters, as the kids say, gonna hate. We have not bought love. We have not silenced criticism. Enough. We are free men and should be able to meet privately. We are free men who should be able to conduct the affairs of our ancient and honorable fraternity. We are free men who should be free to care for one another, to support one another, to offer charitable assistance to whom we please. Enough. Our secrets are our own. They have nothing to do with the profane world, and the profane world has no right to them. Let the profane think what they wish about goats and silly handshakes. They will do us the very great favor of keeping the stupid and ignorant from our west gate. Enough. In this day and age, we cannot be entirely silent in the face of criticism, but neither should we seek to appease the enemy. We can tell the truth and let that answer be enough. We can invite the public to judge us by our history, by the good character of our members, and yes, even by the character of our enemies. Enough. So now ask me what I thought of Inside the Freemasons.
Well, did you write that before or after watching the episode?
After.
I think we know how you feel then, but why don't you tell us?
Well, let's start with the good parts, because there are good parts of it. I loved that they showed a wide diversity of men in the craft, of different ages, of different ethnicities, of different backgrounds, people who were selected to speak about Freemasonry in the video. They showed brothers from all walks of life, with all kinds of different accents. I thought that was beautifully done. They showed different kinds of lodges. They showed an entertainment lodge. They showed a lodge that's a specialty lodge being formed for musicians. They showed just a community lodge. They showed different levels of the craft, everything from His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, down to a local worshipful master who was organizing a gala for his lodge. So I liked that. I liked that they talked to a lot of the wives of the Masons who were like, yeah, I don't really care. It's his thing. He does it. I don't want to know more about it. One of the wives had to make a speech at this local lodge master. His lodge has a tradition of having a ladies' night, it's a big ball, and the wife of the worshipful master is making a speech on behalf of the ladies, thanking the lodge, and she hates public speaking. And she was like, why do I have to do this just because you're involved? And she did it, and it was lovely. And it was sweet, you know?
Yeah.
I love that they showed that Freemasonry inspires charity. Not that they did show, the United Grand Lodge of England's charitable foundation is huge.
Yeah.
And
they buy a helicopter.
Yeah, air ambulances, not just helicopters, air ambulances, which are fully kitted out to, and do a great service for saving lives. And without the United Grand Lodge of England's foundation, that service would have suffered. So they did talk about that, but they also showed this guy who just organized amateur boxing matches. People who had never boxed at all came in and trained for a couple of months, and then they boxed each other, and they each were working for a charity. And if they won their match, the charity got a bigger cut of the money. And I thought that, it didn't directly connect, which is what I liked. It didn't directly connect with the fraternity. It wasn't a Masonic project.
Yeah.
But he was doing it because he was inspired by Freemasonry. Right. And also the story of it, his son, when his son was born, he had a problem, and this particular charity saved his son's life. So that's kind of how he got involved in the thing. But he also, one of the guys who volunteered for this boxing match was a brother from his lodge. I thought that was all beautiful.
Yeah.
So in the 3/4 of an episode you watched,
in the 3/4,
what did you like?
I could have sworn you said just watch one episode. I didn't know I'd have to take off work to watch every episode. I like that. One of the things I hate, and we've talked about before, was one of the things I hate is that we don't tell candidates enough. I don't think, in my opinion, that when they say, what is Freemasonry? And we're like, oh, it's a veil of allegory. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And the candidates don't know, A, what they're going to go through. So they Google it, because who doesn't Google something before they invest $300 of joining, plus however long they had to wait, plus yearly dues. And so they're going to Google it and find A, things that are wrong, and B, it's going to spoil it because nobody at the lodge knew what to tell or not tell the person. And then B, I think we lose a lot of guys after they join because we don't tell them what a regular meeting is like. They go through these degrees. And it's my biggest pet peeve. They go through these degrees, and then after the degrees are done, not everybody. I'm sure a lot of lodges do, but most lodges never talk about what they went through in the degrees until the next time they have a degree.
And then they don't talk about it. They just do the
And
degree.
then they just do the degree, and it's like, oh, you got to learn yourself. So what is that point? So I did like how they went and they spoke about it, and they kind of went through the process of what it's like to join. But do you think they went too far?
Everything was fine as far as I was concerned to a point, and then they crossed the line. Because where they crossed the line, in my opinion, is they showed, now they're going to say it was so little it doesn't matter, but we all took the same obligation. We all remember the obligation, and even a little bit is breaking your obligation. And they showed that a portion of what is in Massachusetts, it's the question and answers. In states call it the catechism, whatever you want to call it. They showed a portion of that. And then later on, they showed another portion of it. And they said they showed part of a rehearsal, but they didn't really show anything. It was officers sitting in chairs and people moving around, but they didn't really talk.
Yeah.
So I was fine with that. But the fact that they did probably the first 3 questions from the first degree really bothered me.
Yeah.
And I was a little, I'm a pragmatist in some respects. Is that information available online? Yeah, it's been, this podcast is named for an early exposure.
Which he never told me for like 8 months.
I thought he knew. But the largest purchaser of early exposures were Masons because they wanted a way to help them memorize because there were no ciphers. That's why Grand Lodges started issuing ciphers, is to stop the exposures from being profitable. But so it's all out there, but that doesn't change my obligation.
Right.
I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to not reveal the secrets. And as far as I'm concerned, that is part of the secrets. So I was very disappointed to see that. I know the United Grand Lodge of England put a big push on for the 300th anniversary of the founding of the first Grand Lodge. I hate that people say 300 years of Freemasonry because we're older than that. But anyway, so they put on this big push for openness. And part of it was in response to another round of criticism of the fraternity as being, self-dealing and self-benefiting and stuff. So they put on this big push for openness, and they wanted to, open the doors and show the public that Freemasonry is benign and harmless, and it's not. And they shouldn't portray it that way. Freemasonry is not harmless. If you're a tyrant, we are your enemy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
If you're a bad guy, we are your enemy. We train men to not tolerate that stuff. We aren't benign and harmless. Mm. And I think trying to make it, it's just a dinner club with some silly plays is, Brother Sean Eyre posted on Facebook, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly the way he said it, but he was like, what we used to tell people to throw them off the scent is what some of us have begun to believe, that we're just a dinner club, And I think that there was too much of that. One, they didn't preserve the secrecy, and 2, there was too much of, we're just a dinner club that does some charitable stuff. It's all okay.
Yeah. So a guy comes to your mother, and I have to say, because he's going to kill me if I don't say it, Brother Joey Boyer would say, your obligation is not my obligation, because it's different for jurisdictions.
Different jurisdictions. But I promise you that every jurisdiction has the same secrecy requirement, and I challenge you to find a way around that portion of it.
That, yeah. But I would say, so keeping with that, what if a guy comes to Amicable and he goes, I pass by this building all the time. What are the Freemasons? And before I give you $300 or whatever, what's it going to be like to go through, and what's it going to be like afterwards?
Right. So for, I guess, 6 years or so, I was the front door of Amicable Lodge.
I am not surprised.
Somebody sent an email in, and I was the person that they met first.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting because every single year there was one guy that got a tour of the building and walked out the front door without it, and told, "Thank you so much for coming by," and there was no follow-up. I never said, "You're not going to tour the lodge," but I never explained to him what the next step was, and they walked out on the street and we never saw them again. Every year there was one of them. Usually because, they were, over the course of conversation, they were clearly not in their right mind, some of them, or some of them were there for really the wrong reasons, or you looked on social media and you were just like, you're not,
not you.
Not you. Yeah. It's amazing how much you can learn about people. People need to get more sophisticated with their social media privacy settings. Yeah. Because if I can find out, but anyway, so usually what I said to them was, I'm going to tell you about all of this, and at the end, you can ask any questions you want. You don't know enough to be able to ask me a question that I can't answer. So unless you are really trying to trap me, in which case I'll just tell you I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah.
Ask whatever you want, and it doesn't matter how silly it feels or don't worry about being offensive. I've heard it all. I've had,
gay man from Texas. I've heard it all, kid.
Well, not only that, but I've had people do tours at the temple and ask about, where's the statue of Baphomet?
Oh.
So,
downstairs.
Yeah. There is no Baphomet. Anyway, so I've asked it. I've heard it all. Ask whatever you want, and then I would say, here's the process for joining, and I'd follow. Massachusetts makes you give the candidate a form that sort of lays it out. But I would also add what our lodge's particular spin on things was, which is, you're going to, when you're ready, you're going to give us this money and fill out these forms, and you're going to give them in, and then you're not going to hear anything for a period of time. What happens during that period of time is we publish we read your information in open lodge. We literally read what you've written. And then we appoint an investigation committee, which sounds like we're going to follow you around in black vans and helicopters, but it's really just 3 guys from the lodge.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool. Who are going to want to get to know you better. By then, you will have received the background check, because Massachusetts requires that you get a background check through this particular company. And they require that the candidate keep the background check because it has Social Security numbers and stuff on it. They don't want the lodges dealing with the private stuff. You'll show that to the committee. If there's anything on it that looks negative, you will have to explain it. Don't lie to us about anything, because if it comes out and then you've lied to us, that's a sure way to not join the lodge.
Yeah.
But almost anything can be explained, almost. If time has gone by and you've changed, we're willing to hear that.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll look at the background check. The 3 guys will talk to you. It will be another chance for you to ask questions from 3 more people. We've gone back and forth on inviting people to dinner at lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time we invite them to at least 1 or 2 dinners so they can meet more people in the lodge. It's difficult though, because our lodge's tradition is to do the first section of a degree, then break for dinner. And so having them come
it's odd. They're rushed.
Well, it's we go to dinner when we're done, and you can stand there and wait for us. So that's been kind of a challenge, but we like to have them come in and meet more people. We maybe invite them to a social event with the lodge or whatever. try to get them to meet people. Once the investigation committee has met with you, they will report back to the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Your name will have been published and gone out to all the members of the lodge so that everyone knows that you're trying to join. And then we will vote on you. One no vote means you can't join this lodge, because you're entering into a lifelong relationship with these men, and they're going to have to see you every single month.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have an absolute veto over who they form that relationship with. That said, I've never, in my experience with that lodge, I've never seen somebody be rejected. Actually, I've never seen a blackball done, because it happens before that usually. But I've never seen somebody petition and then have their petition rejected who didn't really know that their petition was going to be rejected anyway. Okay. There was a good reason there that they either didn't tell us or that there was something else going on. Then you will come to lodge. You will receive information. We usually email them. I think we've stopped sending letters at some point. We email these days. And you'll be told to come to lodge. You'll wear a coat and tie, and you'll be prepared for the degree, and you'll experience the degree the way every Mason has since time immemorial, without any good preparation or knowing what you're getting into. The degree is a ceremony in which you are the focus, and it's intended to teach you certain lessons. There is nothing in that degree which is intended to humiliate you. George Washington was extremely particular about his personal dignity, and he went through a degree very similar to the one that you will go through.
Yeah.
After that degree, you will come to me for candidate education, because back then I was doing all the candidate education. You will come to me for that is the hardest thing that I've ever given up, was doing amicable's candidate education. You'll come to me and we'll sit together and we'll do candidate education, part of which will be memorizing some traditional material, which is before Masons had laminated ID cards. This is how you proved you were a Mason, and it's traditional. Under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you were joining a college fraternity, making you memorize things would be hazing. But we're not in college anymore.
And we also don't haze.
Yeah, we don't haze, but you do have to memorize. So we will work on that, and we will talk some about the history, the philosophy, the symbolism. We'll discuss the degree. We'll answer questions you may have about what happened in the degree, and give you a chance to become familiar with it. Then you'll do the second degree and the third degree. In between each of those, you'll also go to instruction, which is a requirement of the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. And then when you're done, you'll be a full member of the lodge, and you can vote to surrender the lodge's charter and dissolve it. That's the level of trust we're putting in you. We expect you to be that trustworthy. And that's my usual explanation, the short version of what I would say to a candidate. Usually they look kind of stunned, and then I say, do you have any questions? And they say, So then I start going over the form and stuff, because I'm trying to give them time to think of an and then the questions start coming. I found over time that the more questions they ask, the more likely they are to be an active member of the lodge after the degree work. Because I think it really, I'll never forget, there's a brother from Columbia, you know who you are, who used to come to candidate education with a little notebook.
Aww.
And he would wait until everybody else had left, and then he would say, David, I just have a few questions. And then it would start. And then he started writing all the questions in Spanish, because he saw that I was reading them upside down.
Aww.
So, yeah, my goal with candidate education was to get them through the memory work that the lodge required, obviously, but also to get them to a point where they had some particular interest in the fraternity, something that they wanted to follow up on.
Yeah.
My joke is that if I got them to read one book about Freemasonry after candidate's education, my work was done.
That's a really good thing to do.
So if you go to the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts Library and you check out any of the copies of Albert Pike's Esoterica, you'll see Amicable Lodge, Amicable Lodge, Amicable Lodge, Amicable Lodge.
Nice. And while you're there, say hi to Right Worshipful Hunt.
Yeah.
And bring a lunch.
Our grand historian needs to be fed.
Yeah. I meant that he'll teach you something.
Oh, well, that too. But he also appreciates gifts.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Awesome.
So I think the important thing with it's a funny line between how open you want to be and how secretive you want to be. So if they're asking reasonable questions, answer them. Short of giving them the exact, what I objected to in the Inside the Masons was the exact wording was being given.
Yeah. We also got to let them know what a meeting is going to be like.
Well, yeah, and that's different from lodge to lodge because, my mother lodge, there has been a consistent drive from worshipful masters from the term prior to mine to the present day to slow down degree work.
Mm-hmm.
We went through a period where we were doing a lot of degree work because we were doing some rebuilding and we had a flood of people coming in. And, I'll never forget the night we raised 7 guys. The lodge was open in 2 rooms at the same time. It was, a little bit of a nightmare, but also really amazing that you can pull that off, So there's been a drive to slow it down and do programming in between. So I talked to them about the fact that we invite speakers in to talk about various topics.
Mm-hmm.
Then members of the lodge will present. They just had a huge event at my mother lodge where 3 Grand Masters were present. The Grand Master of Massachusetts and 2 other Grand Masters from other countries were visiting. That's amazing, right? I talked to them about the fact that the lodge has some social events. We have a holiday party, which is jokingly called the Feast of St. Gerb, in honor of a past master. But we have various committees and projects they can get involved in, and we talk about that. Every lodge is a little different. What their meetings are a little different. What I keep trying to convince incoming worshipful masters of, every year on Reddit, someone will ask, I'm going into the East. What should I do? What should I remember? Yeah. And I keep trying to push this idea that you need to program your meetings as if people were buying tickets for them. Because guys are giving up a night of their life.
Yeah. Just like you said it before, you need to program the meetings as if somebody was not going to go to work that night and get paid.
Well, and at my mother lodge, a lot of the guys are, we have a number of guys who work in industries where they work nights.
Yeah.
And so they are literally giving up money to be at lodge. That's what made me so cognizant of that, is that every lodge meeting, you have to give the guys, and it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do. Masons are easily amused.
Yeah.
You bring in somebody to talk. You find an excuse to give some attaboys. You give the lodge reason to feel good about itself.
Right.
There's all that kind of stuff works. You just have to plan it out. But if you're going to open lodge, have the reading of the minutes, vote to pay bills, have some announcements, like 700 announcements. By the way, that's another pet peeve of mine. And then close. Why did I give up a meeting? Why did I give up a night at home?
Right? Amen.
And on the topic of announcements, I will never understand that Masons are the worst. When I was at DMLA, it was expected that when you started your term, you would have a calendar for the entire term with all the dates on it and what was happening on all those dates. Now, things change, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. You issued a new calendar.
Right.
And announcements, I started doing announcements, and I was less than perfectly consistent, but I at least tried to send out an email to all the members saying, if you have an announcement, please give it to me so I can write it down, and I'll distribute copies at the meeting so that A, we don't waste time on announcements, and B, so that people like don't walk out of there and then the next day are all calling the worshipful master or somebody else, the poor secretary, me, and saying,
What was that event?
What was that event?
When was it again?
Yeah. What time was it? Where was I supposed to be?
Yeah.
So if you hand out your announcements in advance, you cut huge amounts of time. That's your tip for the day. But it's simple stuff like that makes meetings worthwhile. Anyway, but for the outside world, invite candidates to dinner. That's easy. Massachusetts has open housings. I think Massachusetts is beginning to realize diminishing returns on those. But they used to invite the public to come and take a tour of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And for many years, that brought out the guys whose grandfather was amazing, but their father wasn't. And they were curious about the fraternity.
Yeah.
And we got a whole bunch of those in. I think at this point, like, we've sort of got that.
Yeah.
And so there's diminishing returns on the open houses. But it also is a chance to diffuse like all that curiosity. What is that building? What goes on in that building? Why, people got to ask their questions. We had the mayor come through the temple. We had, people from the neighborhood come through, and then they were satisfied and they never wanted to come back.
All right.
And that's fine. But at least, they're like, oh, there's Masons. They're not such bad guys.
Yeah.
But it really does bother me that inside the Masons, and it was just 3 or 4 sentences, and one of them is one of the ones that's not preserved in, I think, most American rituals. It's one of the old Prestonian questions, and it has it's one of the ones that I think is funny. So when I heard it, I laughed, and then I was mad that it was there. But basically, the question is, we say that the lodge meets at noon. I'm not giving the wording. The lodge meets at noon, but we usually meet in the evening. How do you explain that? And the answer is, well, Freemasonry exists over the whole globe. So it's always noon somewhere.
Nice.
So I thought that was humorous, and then I was annoyed that they showed the exact wording.
Nice.
They showed a piece of processions into Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
They showed people getting their grand honors. They showed the installation of a provincial grand.
Getting
their grand rank. Grand rank,
not grand honor.
Sorry, grand rank.
All right.
Which in the because a lot of Americans don't know, the United Grand Lodge of England has a tradition of giving, like if we give the various medals, they make you a past grand officer. You never do the work, you never are that, but you get grand rank. And that is and it's the big attaboy, right?
Yeah.
And so they showed some of that. They showed a provincial grandmaster being installed. They showed the obligation, but I mean that's an installation. So I didn't have a problem with, and there were really genuinely sweet things about it. I think showing the relationship among the guys, and how happy they were to spend time together. That's what
clearly fake. Clearly,
yeah. That's another thing that I tell anyone who has ever asked me about joining a lodge, because it's very difficult to select a lodge from the outside. If you're lucky enough to live in a location where you have choices of lodges, it's really hard to choose. And I always tell them, try to make it to some social event and see how the members are around each other.
Yeah.
Do they genuinely enjoy each other's company? Because if they do, then you're more likely to.
That's a good point.
If they're cliquey and they're sitting at tables with wide spaces between each other, that is a bad sign.
And on that note, we want to hear what everybody else thought of
Yeah, we have a Facebook page,
yeah, three distinct thoughts. Let us know in the comments what you thought about it.
Yeah.
And then see if you hated it or loved it. I'm curious. And please no spoilers, even though David spoiled the whole thing for me. Now I don't have to go binge.
No,
The other
there's
20 episodes.
There's some great stuff in there. I also watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now ask me why that matters.
Why does that matter?
Because in the movie version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they there's this scene where it's people in a cathedral, science fiction Douglas Adams cathedral. A whole bunch of people who believe that the universe was created from a great sneeze, and they wait the coming of the white hanky to wipe everything away. And that whole scene where they're in that cathedral was filmed in Freemasons Hall in the United Grand Lodge of England.
Oh, cool.
So it was funny to see Freemasons Hall decked out for the annual investiture, and then to see it in this scene, which is very short in Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, to see it dressed out as if it's some sort of space opera cathedral was funny.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna end this.
You're gonna finish the.
Yeah.
You're not, are you?
I'm gonna get to it. They got a Lodge TV show now, Lodge 49.
Lodge. I watched the free episodes. I'm not gonna.
How much free time? How much free time do you have?
Evidently a lot.
More than me do. All right.
It was 2 episodes
Probably.
that were free. It's nothing Masonic. It's more like about the Oaks.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more joining for a bar.
Got it. All right. How do you want to close this one out?
We have our closing.
You gonna do the whole thing? Brian's been waiting 8 minutes for us.
Oh, then just edit it. We're not going to do a closing tonight. Thanks.
Thanks. This has been Dogs and the Russian. Thank you to our Patreons, especially our new people. Put their name here. We also like to put the sponsor here. Fossil Bluff. Fossilbluff.com. Great Masonic stuff. Have a good night.